Thank you for staying with us. Now, let's turn our spotlight to the state of the states for an in-depth look at how state governments are faring 2 years into the administrations of most of them. Now, despite the significant financial allocations and efforts at the federal level to empower the states with a lot more resources now than ever before, from what they themselves are saying, the reality for many citizens remains grim, with poverty levels seemingly unchanged or even worsening in some cases. Now, beyond this is the supposed independence of local government administrations and state houses of assembly, which often feels more like a promise on paper than a reality. So, are these institutions functioning as they should? What challenges hinder state governments from delivering meaningful change? Could the structure of governance itself be part of the problem? So let's have conversation with two gentlemen this morning. I'd like to begin with Mr. Olusegun Elemo, who is the Executive Secretary of Paradigm Leadership Support Initiative. He joins us virtually, along with Comrade Aliyu Kankara, who is the President, Nigeria Union of Local Government Employees, NOGE. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Let me begin with you, Honorable, beg your pardon, Comrade Kankara, joining us virtually from Kano, I believe. Congratulations is in order, first of all, on Comrade, on your election. Now, if you would assess, because one of the critical issues that people have taken up with the state governments is the fact that local government administrations are not as independent and as functional, as pragmatic as they are expected to be, despite the ruling of the Supreme Court last year. What is your assessment of, what's your current assessment of the general state of affairs in the states, particularly from the grassroots perspective? Comrade Kankara, that is for you. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, good morning and thank you for having me.
Yes.
The issue you raised about the performance of state government with regard to local government administration is very pathetic. The situation of local government councils in Nigeria, is very pathetic because of the undue interference from the state government. As you rightly said, the Supreme Court have spoken, they have passed their judgment that funds meant for local government should go directly into their account. And this was since July last year. But up to this moment, that judgment has not been implemented it has not been implemented. State governments are still hijacking the funds meant for local government councils, and which make the local government ineffective.
Well, if you can, before you go on, Honorable, I beg your pardon, Comrade, if you can hear me, what should happen? What's the real thing that ought to have happened since the ruling of the Supreme Court? What would you say that the local governments themselves ought to have done to facilitate the enforcement of that judgment?
You see, the local governments are helpless because the Ministry of Finance, the federal government, has the responsibility of disbursing these funds. So it is the federal government that has the responsibility to implement this judgment, because this money, as you know, comes from the federation account and is controlled by the federal government, that is CVN and the Accountant General of the Federation. So what we expect them to do is to ask the local government to come forward and, present their account numbers to them, and then they will start disbursement directly to the local government account. But up to this moment, they have not done that. So what we need is the political will on the part of the federal government to implement this judgment.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. Mr. Lemo, I know that you have championed the issue of transparency at the state level over time. If you would take an assessment, it's been 2 years, whether with or without data, perhaps also taken from what data may have said over the years. What is your general take on the state of the states?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ayo, for that question, and I'm happy to join the conversation this morning. Let me first of all say that listening to the Norgay president is very, very depressing, extremely depressing. I would have expected that by now we shouldn't be having issues around implementation of the judgment of the Supreme Court. And then it goes to tell you the kind of state capture, the capture that we'll experience at the subnational level. The governors are extremely powerful, perhaps maybe more powerful than the president in practice, even though that is not what the book says. So what is the data saying with regards to accountability at the state level? Earlier this year, like we normally do every year, we published the Subnational Audit Efficacy Index assessment for 2024. And it will interest you that 21 states, did not, publish audit reports online. And that hinders accountability, activities. Also, it will interest you that and this connects to what Honorable Bill has said about legislative independence. The independence they currently have, how effectively are they discharged their constitutional mandate? So, for instance, legislators at the state level are supposed to review the reports of the Auditor General annually. But in our assessment for 2024, only 2 out of 36 states were effective in that regard, which meant that about 34 states, did not even discharge, their constitutional mandate. I'm talking about, state houses of assembly now. Again, it points to the capture that we experience at that state level. And that's why you will see that more monies are going to states. For instance, 8 states, including Ekiti, Ebonyi, Benue, Kebbi, Kogi, Jigawa, Adamawa, and Niger, all had allocations increase of more than 120% between 2024 and 2025 when you compare their budgets. In fact, in the case of Niger, the allocation grew by 153%. That's a huge, increase. But did that reflect in the number of poor people in that state? Did that reflect in, for instance, food security, the amount of food items produced from that state, which is supposed to be, an agrarian environment? So governors are getting more money. The Supreme Court says release local governments to be able to function more properly. You still have a situation where even states that seemingly said they agree with the judgment of the Supreme Court are still holding back and ensuring that the local government don't get their funds. And even some states have, publicly, denounced the judgment of the Supreme Court, and there's no consequence for that. So you see, if we must move from where we used to be, now we have more money. We're not even talking about money now. We have more money, and with the tax laws, the tax bills that have now been enacted, which the president I expect will, sign into law any moment from now, there will be even more money. I've always said it's not about more money. It's about the leadership integrity of the people who are in power to use that more money for public good.
Doctor, beg your pardon, just a second, Mr. Elemo. There's something you said the other time when you said, you know, the things that are supposed to have been done by the state governments are not being done, and you said, quote, and I quote, there are no consequences for that.
Absolutely.
Is that really the true state of things? The state governments can do anything and nothing, no one can call them to account?
I mean, look at it this way. The highest court in the land says this is what should be done. The Attorney General for the Federation came out and said, we will enforce that judgment. Almost 12 months after that, we are still struggling with implementing the judgment of the highest courts in the land. I mean, who else do you need to speak? God to speak to their heart? So these are the issues. And these are the same state governments that enacted audit laws in their respective states. It's interesting to let you know today that from our assessment, only 2 states have implemented the financial autonomy clause in their audit laws. Only 4 states have implemented the administrative independence clause in their audit laws. These are laws that the state government, the state governors by themselves, in cooperation with the state houses of assembly, passed the law, the bills, and the governors signed it voluntarily into law. And then you are struggling to implement it. So it's not surprising, because if you cannot find it easy to implement the judgment of the Supreme Court, you know, that is supposed to be enforced right from the center down, how then do we expect you that you will voluntarily implement your own audit law that you voluntarily assented?
There's so many questions to ask you on some of these things that you said, but we have 2 of you on the panel. Let me come to you, Comrade Aliyu Kankara. So the Constitution guarantees the independence of local government administrations. So I just wonder that despite the ruling of the Supreme Court on that one, that is what we have. But you may want to speak to that, as well as something that Mr. Elemo said just now, that nobody can call the state governments to account. Do you agree with him?
Yes, I totally agree with him.
So even the houses of assembly are powerless to call the state government to account. That's what you're saying?
No, they cannot. They cannot call them into account. On paper, they are supposed to have the responsibility of calling them into account. But in practice, our state houses or assembly cannot call our state government or our state governors to order. They cannot.
But why is that the case?
Well, because of, you can say because of politics. Like my brother said here, the state governors are even more powerful than the president of this country in practice. So in practice, the state House of Assembly members are at the mercy of the state governors. So they cannot call them into account. Now, that is the sad situation. That is the sad state of this country.
Okay.
When you have people who are too powerful and nobody can call them into account, they are not accountable to anybody, then you are bound to have this kind of problem.
No, so now, one other issue that I'd like you to address, Comrade, is this. From the federal government, what the federal government is saying, and proudly so, and what the state governments are confirming, and which Mr. Elemo has also validated now, is that some of the states, a good number of the states, have more than 100% increase in the allocations that come to them. So
yes,
who should be holding them to the accountability grid? How, okay, maybe I should ask you this. In what ways would you say that maybe in the state where you are now, or maybe surrounding states, what would you say, how effectively would you say this has impacted on the governance of the people, on the livelihoods of the people? How has it affected poverty numbers, poverty figures, and all of that?
It has not affected the poverty. I mean, it has not affected the lives of the common man in any way. This increase in revenue to the subnational government and the federal government has not in any way affected the lives of our citizens. People are in abject poverty. People cannot afford to eat 3 times a day. People are struggling to survive. Basic education has collapsed. Healthcare has collapsed. Insecurity everywhere, abject poverty everywhere. So this increase in revenue has not translated into any way.
But we cannot say, comrade, that nothing has happened at all. There must be something that the state governments are doing that we can say, okay, marginally, they have improved.
In my own opinion, nothing has happened. Nothing. Except additional burden, more suffering for our people. That is what happened.
But the local government administrations in particular, they have more allocations to them. Some of them should be having their allocations directly now.
Like I told you, nobody is taking, no local government in this country is taking their allocation directly from the federal government. No local government in this country. The allocation meant for local government is being channeled through the state government. And it is business as usual. So nothing has changed.
Well, Mr. Elemo, can you confirm that?
Well, we cannot say entirely that, absolutely nothing has changed. The question is, whatever changes we're experiencing right now, is it inclusive enough to take the poor people, the vulnerable citizens, out of the depressive experiences that they currently have? So, for instance, you have more money to states. Many states would rather, go on elephant projects. States that, could even barely boast of road transport infrastructure now want to have airports. It's very absurd. Roads, states that could barely, it's not even barely. States that don't have, intercity, rail system that will limit transportation burden, on the most of their citizens that are vulnerable, wants to go and construct airports. Many states now have revamped, their roads, which is good. You attract investments, you open up the state, is fine. But again, is that kind of, development, is that the entirety of what you need in the immediate? Because, at the end of the day, is that as the leader, you look at what is important for the people, at every point in time. And you take decisions based on what you think is important, for the people. And I don't think that has, whatever decisions that state governors, are now, making with, increased allocations, to their states, I don't think it's, supports, enhancing the quality of life, for the people in their state. And we'll need to revisit that. Now, on the issue of...
go ahead.
On the issue of, state legislators, you see, for my own suggestion is that we need some strong political disruptions at the state level. You can't have, we are crying about having a one-party system in Nigeria, but that's typically what's happening at the state level, where you don't have opposition, where there is no alternative policy position, where there is no competitive, electoral system. And that's why the governors are getting away with so many things.
There's something that you said, Mr. Elemo, my apologies. There's something that you said the other time, that no one can call the state governments to order. And that's scary. And unfortunately, Comrade Kankara agrees with you as the president of the National Union of Local Government Employees all over the country. Now, where do we go from here? What needs to be done? The states' assemblies, houses of assembly, that are supposed to be checking and balancing out things at the state levels, Comrade Kankara has confirmed that they are in the pocket, so to speak, of the governors, and a good number of people agree with that. So Where do we go from here as someone who has been chasing transparency in governance for a while?
Where we go from here is strong political disruption at the state level.
How? What do you mean by strong political disruptions?
You need multi-party players, especially at the State House of Assembly. You cannot have a single party, dominating the entire State House of Assembly, and you expect them to stand up to the governor. And, so that's not going to happen. And that's exactly what we're experiencing right now. And in addition to that, is that we need leadership integrity. And I think I think it was Dr. Benga who talked about good people. You see, at the end of the day, it's not much about whether your laws are strong or weak. Yes, you need that. You need strong policy, environment. You need all of that. But who comes to implement it? Who comes to give life, to those laws and policies and all of that? Consider what has happened with regards to the Supreme Court judgment, for instance. So you have a strong, you have a strong position from the center by the Supreme Court. But who is supposed to implement it? The federal government, supposed to implement it. But why are they not implementing it? Because, the governors are very powerful and they negotiate with the center to say, if you do this, that is, contrary to our interest, when it comes to election, we will also sabotage you. And I think that's why the federal government has been very sluggish in pushing forward the position of the Supreme Court. So ultimately, you need leadership integrity, you need people, and you need political disruption. The kind of disruption that we are, advocating at the center, which the president, alluded to in his speech on June 12th, saying that he is not about one-party system. We don't want one-party, system operations at the state level as well. We want a State House of Assembly that is multi-party, that can debate policy, very well and provide, and hold the governor accountable. Because at the end of the day, the people have yielded their sovereignty, to the legislators at the state level. And if they are refusing to, to perform their constitutional mandate in that regard, then what else? You have to wait for another election to come, and then you do it over and over again, and the cycle repeats itself, and then the country stays stagnant.
I took a look at the Constitution. I've taken a look at the Constitution a number of times on Comrade Kankara, and one of the things that I found out is that, one, the resources that come from the federal government into the state joint allocation with the local government is just one contribution. The state government is supposed to contribute into that purse as well for onward disbursement into the local government's account. That is one. The second thing is, I also know that according to the Constitution, the state government should be sitting with the local government chairman and the local government administrations about the economic diversification in the states. That is supposed to happen. Would you say in any way, manner, shape, or form, in any shade at all, Comrade Kankara, that happens?
No, that is what the Constitution or what the law says, that the essence of state and local government joint account is, the whole idea of that account is when the federation, funds from the federation account come into the account, then the IGR, by law, local government are supposed to take, I think, 20% of the IGR within the state. So the 20% of the IGR should also go into that account. Then it will now be distributed to the local government councils. But unfortunately, not even the 20% that is supposed to be paid into that account by the state government, even the one that comes from the federation account is not even remitted to the local government. It's not even being disbursed to the local government. So they spend it from the state local government joint account directly. So we are not even talking about IGR from the state here. We are even struggling to see how we can get the one that is coming from the federation account so that it can go directly to the local government. So it has even gone to the extent that state governments are now even taking over the revenue meant to be collected by the local government councils. They are even hijacking that one because there are some categories of revenues that are supposed to be collected by the local government, that local government councils are by law supposed to collect that revenue within their local government, within their domain. But unfortunately, what is happening now, the state government are engaging, in most cases, consultants to take over the revenue, and they take over the money, and they don't pay anything to the local government councils. That is what is happening. And let me also add, the essence of governance is to improve the living standard of the citizens and to also safeguard their lives and their properties. So in Nigeria now, the living standard of citizens is going low. 130 million Nigerians are living below poverty line. And also look at the insecurity everywhere. Lives and properties of Nigerians are not secured. So that was why I said, despite the increase in revenue going into government coffers, both at the federal and state, and even the local government councils, nothing has changed.
Okay. Mr. Elemo, so where do we, the issues, will continue to be at the front burner. It is expected that politicians that become government officials have a job of work on their hands. One of the arguments that have always been provoked in my mind is whether or not the officials of states that are both elected, that is directly employed by the people, or selected, that is appointed by maybe the state governments or even the legislators, they are supposed to understand what is expected of them. Do you think there is sufficient understanding of the responsibilities that they are employed or appointed to take on, particularly at the state level?
You see, there's total ignorance. I mean, there's total ignorance. And when there is, well, you see, for Christians, the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So when people are ignorant, you tend to have this kind of scenario that we have. For me, what I expect would happen is that, you see, all of these smaller political parties, rather than concentrate on winning elections in the state, at the state level, especially to the state houses of assembly, holding the executive, if they are not able to, to constitute the executive, for instance, if they are not able to determine who becomes the governor, if you have 5, 10 assembly members, you then provide policy alternatives, and you are also able to hold the governor accountable. Again, from our assessment, the 2024 SA Index, 17 states could not account for 197 billion, which was about 893 audit queries. But what is also interesting is that more than half of the states, didn't even provide, 21 states, for instance, didn't publish audit reports. So we could not even determine how much was not accounted for by the executive in that financial year. If, for instance, I was a member of the legislature at the state level, I will have information to that extent, because the audit report that is not published online would have been submitted to me as a member of parliament. And if I belong to the opposition, I would be able to use that data, that information, to hold the executive, accountable to the degree that with which they have deviated from implementing the annual budget. You see, these are all, fundamentals that you expect that those who are vying for political offices, will understand. But everybody wants to become president. Everybody wants to become a senator. Everybody wants to become, a House of Representative member. Nobody wants to go, to the House of Assembly, to contribute to the quality of governance at that level. That's what I'm saying, that what we need at the state now is strong political disruption. in which you can have up to like 5 political parties or even more forming, constituting, the members of legislature
Okay.
at that level. At that
How about this? There's also been that argument. Maybe I should ask you, Honorable Kankara, I beg your pardon, Comrade Kankara. There's always been that argument also that the local government administrations themselves don't seem to have strong political personalities at the local levels. That maybe if we had people who can look the governor in the eye, who can look the state speaker of the house in the eye and tell them the honorable gospel truth that they need to have, maybe things would have been different.
Yeah, it's true. The problem of local government council, leadership recruitment in local government council is the problem of state independent electoral commission. No responsible person would like to contest an election under state independent electoral commission because they will not even give you the opportunity. So for us to get it right at the local government, we have to, restructure the electoral system, the leadership recruitment system at the local government councils. These state independent electoral commissions are being used by state governments, state governors to ensure that their cronies are elected into chairmanship at local government council at the local government. You can imagine a situation whereby in a whole state, one party will now win all the councillorship seat and the chairmanship seat in that particular state. Can you call that an election? Truly, there is no election at the local government councils. The state independent electoral commissions cannot and can never be allowed by the state governors to conduct free and fair election at the local government councils. And until we have free and fair local government election at the local government councils, we cannot have responsible people who can be elected, who can be accountable to their people. We only have people who are accountable to their governors, who are accountable to their party leaders.
Comrade Kankara, you have raised,
the problem.
My apologies, Comrade Kankara, you have raised a very troubling, if I can use that term, troubling, issue right here. Because if you are saying that the state independent electoral commissions cannot conduct elections that local government administrations will be proud of, or people who would rather go into the local governments to offer their services to the people can be proud of, then you are essentially saying that we are never going to have true democracy at the local government levels. So what needs to be done in your opinion?
What needs to be done is constitutional amendment, which we have been advocating for. That should be constitutional amendment. The election, local government council election, should be transferred to INEC. If you can look back to 1998 or 1999, you can see the caliber of people that were elected as local government chairmen, as councillors. You can see the caliber of people because it was INEC that conducted the election, and the election was free and fair. So, but now, if you look at what is happening, this is not election. You can't call this election by all standards. You can't call this election. When you have 300 councillors, you have maybe 30 chairmanship seats, one party, ruling party, winning all the seats. You call that election is not an election. Like what we have been saying here, the state governors are too powerful. They are too powerful. So you cannot trust the election of local government into their hands. Once you give them, you allow them to continue to conduct local government elections, Please forget about democracy at the local government level.
Shouldn't we be saying that, shouldn't the political parties themselves have a responsibility in this? Because one would expect that, be it at the federal, state, or local government levels, there are political parties, and they should want, multi-party democracy, as Mr. Lemon has been talking about. Do you see a role for the parties themselves, the political parties here?
You see, unfortunately, all the political parties are the same. They are also guilty. If you go to where APC is ruling, if you go to an APC state, you'll see that there's something is happening. If you go to a PDP state, you'll see that there's something is happening. If you go to Afghan state, something is happening. As far as election into local government councils is concerned. So I don't see the political parties, having the moral. They can't change anything. It is about we Nigerians. It is about constitutional amendment.
Okay.
There has to be a constitutional amendment. The Nigerians should insist on constitutional amendment where all these anomalies can be corrected.
Okay. Mr. Lemo, part of the things that I think the federal government has done, or rather that has happened from the Constitution, is the capacity for the states themselves to be able to do a lot more. So two issues to raise. On the one hand, some have said, some people, speaking on behalf of state governments have said, look, even though we have more money, the value of the money that we have is no different from what we had before. That is one. Secondly, the state governments now have authority, per the Constitution, to come up with all kinds of things. For instance, they should be able to generate their own electricity now, according to the constitutional provision. Then we also heard from Dr. Okwefa last week that the state governments themselves now should be able to come up with their own rail system and all of those things. So what would you say is holding them back from this infrastructure or developmental initiatives that can develop the lives of their people?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that to an extent, there's been some infrastructure revamp, and it goes in different ways for different states. So to that extent, I know that the argument about the value of the allocations staying the same, well, I don't submit to that argument because many states are taking up projects, capital projects, that they've not been able to execute in their own term, or their predecessor couldn't do. So that invalidates that argument. The question is, are you putting money in the right sector, and are you putting the amount of the money required for the right sector in there? So, for instance, how much money are you putting in education? How much money are you putting in healthcare? How much money are you putting in transportation, in agriculture? Versus how much money you are putting in, for instance, you want to build airports, you want to do some kinds of imaginary things that will help you to funnel money out of the treasury. So those are the things. What constitutes the quality of life for an average person is that you can access quality education. You can, the transportation system is so efficient and not expensive. You have access to, affordable healthcare and quality healthcare, and then you have housing. How many state governments, for instance, are investing in housing? They would rather wait for the private sector that has not appeared in a decade or is not near appearing, to come and invest in housing. Meanwhile, most of your majority of your citizens do not have, housing, to be able to do not have shelter to lay their heads. So those are the things. And when you see, for instance, the procurement process that goes on at the state level, you will be shocked. It's not competitive, it's not inclusive, It's not open. You have a situation where, the governor handpicks a contractor to execute, large amount of, of project that involves huge amount of public money. So those are the issues that I think we need to focus on. But again, is the quality of leadership at the House of Assembly. They do not have the wherewithal, even though the Constitution guarantees their independence, but in practice, they do not put that independence.
I guess the issues are right now in public eye for anyone and everyone to take on, because the state of the states, from what you gentlemen have described this morning, is not as pleasant as one would have expected. We expect that there would also, of course, be reactions. So what is your reaction? If you know a little more than have been discussed, please reach out to us. Of course, you have our email address on your screen right now. But gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to say thank you for your time. Mr. Olusegun Elemo, Executive Secretary, Paradigm Leadership Support Initiative, we thank you so much for your time, as well as Comrade Aliyu Kankara, President, Nigeria Union of Local Government Employees, NOGE. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so when we return, it's time to take a look at World Blood Donor Day 2025. It's today. But what are the benefits to you, and what are the things that you can do to make the life of an average neighbor better? See what you can do after now.